Hi, I'm Brett Mitchell. Welcome to Rod and Reels. We're going to do a little fishing today, catch some bass. Me and Nelson Walker are going to go at it and see who can get the most today. We're at Lake Marion. We're going to start off this morning. It's real early. Sun's just coming over the trees. We're going to do a little topwater fishing, see if we can get an early morning bite. Fish around these pads. Starting off with a frog. Frog fishing is about as fun as it gets.
Now tell me about the lure.
This particular lure is called a horny toad. It's a buzz frog. Soft plastic. We rig it much like we rig a worm. It's a big hook, goes through the front, comes out the side, makes it weedless. We just buzz this across the top. It makes a lot of action, throws a lot of water on the water, a lot of wake on the water. Basically, the fish will follow it. They'll see it come across. They're in these pads, and they're there to ambush whatever comes by their way. This time of the year, when it's really hot, there's two schools of thought in bass fishing. Either you go deep and go where the water's cooler, or you get in the heavy cover, and the fish use this for shade and ambush to catch the smaller fish, the prey fish. So we're fishing for the shallow fish. I'm not much of a deep fisherman. I think it's kind of boring. But they use these pads. They'll get underneath them. The pads create shade, and the shade attracts the bait fish. The bait fish attract the larger fish, and this is something you can do just about when the water hits about 70 degrees, 65 to 70 degrees, right on through the summer until the fall.
Yeah, what I'm doing right now is I'm throwing a crankbait. It's a lipped crankbait, and this bait will run about 6 to 10 feet. And I'm out on the main lake, and I'm trying to find basically where the big pods of shad that move around out on the main lake. That's what the fish key on. And there's ledges out here where it will drop. You know, and depends on the size or the depth of the hump. You know, it may go from 5 to 15 feet, or it may go from 10 to 15 feet. You know, the main lake behind us at the deepest point is about 24 feet. Santee's really not a deep lake, and these fish don't stay super deep. They stay mid-range, usually anywhere from 5 to 15 feet. And but they're always going to be around those bait fish. And what I'm doing is fishing the ledge, just trying to make contact with a group of fish that's up on that ledge, looking for something to feed on. Sometimes you can actually, early in the morning, you'll actually see the shad out here flicking on top. And it doesn't take long when that sun pops up for those shad to go deep and actually pull out and suspend out in the middle of the lake. And the fish will do the same thing. They pull out and get out there with them too. So all I'm doing is cranking this bait starting it out where it's touching the bottom, and then when it gets out off the edge of that ledge, it comes out over deeper water. And those fish are usually relating to where that drop is. And it's kind of it's a hit or miss proposition at best, because those fish this time of year roam around in little packs, and whenever you catch a fish, you're liable to catch several fish, pretty quick. But you might also go a good ways without ever getting a bite. So.
One of the big things with this kind of fishing, whether it be this bait or any of the other top water baits and frogs and stuff, is you really need to be paying close attention. The fish will strike at the very moment that you're not paying attention, and a lot of times you'll miss them if you're not ready. Tackle, line, all of it is a complete system for this kind of fishing. You're all usually fishing in a very heavy cover. Pads, weeds, wood. And it's very important to have the right setup. I don't use anything but a heavy braided line. I usually start with 50 up to 65 pound tests. A lot of people say, why? That's a lot of tests. Well, it's not necessarily the size of the fish. It's the cover that you're fishing in and how hard it is for these fish. These fish will, like if he was to hit it right there, he would bury up in those weeds, and I've got to be able to get him out and keep him on. If I had just 15 pound tests or so, there's a good chance that fish would break the line. And the braid offers a no stretch that gets a good hook set. And a lot of what the equipment is about the hook set and physically being able to get the fish out of the cover. It's a 7.5 foot rod, specifically made. ALX Rods makes my rods, and this is specifically built to fish with this bait.
I actually grew up here on the lake at Tawkaw, and I don't know, I think you're sort of born that way, but ever since I was 3, I've just loved to be on the water. But I started bass fishing. I actually had an uncle and another friend of his that sort of got me started, and they didn't fish anything but bass, and so they pretty much pushed me into bass fishing. We crappie fished and brim fished a little bit when I was little, but by the time I was probably 13, I was bass fishing just about all the time. And, I'm 48 now, so I've got a lot of years of fishing. And I fished, pretty much this upper lake has been my home waters from the dam up to the 95 bridge in Waibu, Tawkaw areas. I've probably fished every foot of it. So, time on the water, you can't replace that. The more time you spend out, the more you're going to learn, and the more situations you run into, the better you're going to adapt for the next time that you run into that same situation. But I've been fishing tournaments. I started fishing tournaments right out of high school, and into college I was already fishing some tournaments, and I fished some professional tournaments, but never professionally. Just fishing them for fun pretty much. And that's been pretty fun, because I've fished all the way up to Canada and down to Florida, and over to Texas a few times, and every lake is different. But the fish behave pretty much the same wherever you go.
I've been bass fishing about 30 years. I started when most people start, as a teenager, just graduating from other types of fishing. And I guide the Santee Cooper Lakes and Lake Murray, and take people bass fishing. All I do is bass fish, and offer instruction. I coached a college team, the USC fishing team, at the University of South Carolina. I fish in professional level tournaments, although I don't consider myself a full-time pro.
In the springtime, these fish move back up in these bays to spawn. And you know, after about the middle part of May, once the spawn is done and the fry have hatched out, those fish start moving out and come back out to this main lake, spend the summer out here. They'll be out on the main lake until about the first part of September, and then they'll actually start moving back up again shallow to feed up in the fall. It's gonna be a scorcher day today if the wind doesn't blow.
This is just another version of the frog, just a different bait. We're fishing for pretty much the same fish. I just converted from the buzz frog to a Spro Bonsai popper. Spro is probably one of the #1. There's one coming at it right there. You see? He's still there. Come on. Did not eat it.
When I learned to bass fish, I learned to fish basically, you know, a plastic worm. And you can throw a worm anywhere, on any depth, at anything. So, you know, we're gonna bounce around a little bit, and I'm gonna show you 2 or 3 things. One of the predominant patterns of catching fish on Santee, and it happens year round, is the cypress trees that line the lake. You know, and we'll stop and fish a few cypress trees, but you can throw a worm around cypress trees and usually catch you a few fish. You know, you can throw a worm out here where I'm fishing right now. It's just slower and you can't cover as much water. But you can fish around piers, you know, docks with the worm. You can fish the bank, you know, around grass on the shoreline. You can fish that worm. And that's the main thing, is just kind of, that's your basic starting point probably, because it's such a versatile bait. And then you expand from there.
It's called a fish stalker trick stick. I rig it wacky style, just like you see it. Cook it right in the middle. Use a big old fat catfish hook, nothing fancy. And I'll throw it around the wood, the trees, the stumps, and just let it float down. It's easy to do, nothing hard about it. You just throw it out under a stump, under a tree, around a piece of grass. Let it sink to the bottom, just pick it up and just kind of shake it. Everybody thinks, well, you're going to get hung up with the open hook like that. Really, you don't get hung up very much. Once in a while. You get these at a lot of the local stores carry them all around the PD and low country and upstate. But if you can't get them there, you can get them at FishStalkerTackle.com. Come in a whole array of colors. I mean, all the good ones anyway. I'm partial to this one and June bug, but whatever works on their lake is you can find one.
This past weekend, it seemed to be the color. So sometimes you have to switch colors from day to day. It depends on the water clarity, but also sometimes just the mood of the fish. They make, you know, a gazillion colors, and they catch more fishermen than fish. But there's basic cues that really work from day to day. And this water's kind of clear in here today. You can see down about 2 feet. So I'm gonna go with a little bit more of a translucent color worm and see if that doesn't work. What I'm doing is I'm close enough to the tree that I don't even need to cast. I'm just doing a little underhand pitch, and I'm pitching it onto the shady side of the tree. And I'm basically letting it sit there and giving him time to come get it if he's at the base of that tree. I'll shake it several times, and I don't fish it all the way back to the boat. I reel it on in, and I may pitch in there 2 or 3 times to the same tree. Sometimes they want it sitting still, and sometimes they want you to be shaking it.
There's one. If I got him, I might not have got him. Yeah, I did. Hey, yeah. Do I have him? Nope. Do not have him. Yeah, I do. Ah, he's a little one. Now that's a good example of why you want the heavy tackle. Because of where they are. I mean, that fish was buried in so much stuff, I didn't realize they even had him on. He's not very big, not even a keeper.
The bass fishing is almost, I mean, there's so many different baits and techniques that you actually will use, and in any particular day, you may use 6 or 7 different ones. So we have a lot of rods, so we don't have to, one thing, we don't want to have to retie baits all the time. So it's a lot easier to, you know, I'll have sometimes 5 or 6 rods laid out on the deck, and that keeps you from having to, you know, cut one off and retie a different bait. But really what it does more than anything is certain baits react differently on certain rods. You know, like that crankbait I was throwing it on a 7-foot rod, and it's a medium action rod versus a medium heavy that's a stiffer rod. And what that medium action allows you to do is you can load that rod up a little better when you go to throw. It's more flexible, and it'll actually load up and help throw that bait further. And the 7-foot rod does the same thing. The longer the rod, the easier it is to throw a distance. This worm rod that I'm using is a 7-foot rod too, but it's a medium heavy rod. It's stiffer. It's real stiff through the midsection, but it's got a fairly decent little tip on it. So the tip allows you to do the casting, but if I get a bite and I have to set the hook, then the backbone is what's going to pull him out. And same thing in that case, a 7-foot rod is quicker. You can cover more water setting the hook, putting pressure on him. The longer the rod, the more, you know, momentum you can put onto him. Better leverage that you've got.
I want the cast to land right against the tree. I guess it just goes from habit, but I don't really want the fish to see the bait until I'm making the presentation I want. Like if I make a bad cast just like that, I mean, I'll reel it right back in because I really want to be a lot closer to the tree than what I landed. The presentation is the fall as the bait's falling down. I'll only work it 2 or 3 times. I'm target fishing. I'm not necessarily covering water like I am with a horizontal bait where I'm just bringing it across. I'm fishing the tree. And when I get the bait far enough away from the tree that I don't really believe the fish is there, I'll just reel it in and make another cast.
gonna see if I can't show you another pattern that works on this lake that can actually happen year-round. Starting in about February, when fish come up shallow, they'll stage up on the cypress trees, and then they move up and spawn. And after they've spawned, actually they'll spawn around the trees sometimes, but you know, a lot of times they'll go in beyond them and spawn on the bank. When they're done spawning, they'll pull out and kind of recuperate, and the fry will get around the trees. And then when they move out onto the main lake, a lot of the fish leave, but some fish will remain shallow all year long. And when you're fishing cypress trees, you're not looking for any one group of fish. I got a bite here, right here.
All right.
Oh, I missed him.
This is the cow pasture area. Middle of Lake Marion. Basically the same kind of cover. This is a different area of the lake. This grass we're fishing is called the crested floating heart. Grows into mats, like you see here. Provides shade and cover for the bait and the fish.
Yeah, that's the third pattern that we try to do here on Santee, which has become a pattern just in the last 2 years, is fishing this crested floating heart, which is a nuisance vegetation that's come on. You know, we've had lily pads here, you know, natural lily pads for years, and if you look at this floating heart, it grows deeper than a standard lily pad, and it originated, we're told, the rumor is, you know, from a goldfish pond on the other side of the lake. It was a decorative like plant that people would put in ponds, and somebody decided they didn't want it anymore, so they tossed it, and it has really spread. Santee Cooper, the utility, you know, has to come out and they're trying to spray this stuff and keep it from really taking over, because they're afraid it could really become a nuisance. It's not as thick as it really looks. A boat will run through it, but the more that boats run through it, the more it spreads. When it's first coming on in the spring, it only grows during the warmer months. So when it's first coming on in the spring, it's really tender, and you can't hardly throw a bait through it. It just collapses on top of a spinnerbait or a worm, and it just is aggravating the fish. But once it gets a little more mature in the summer, you know, you can actually fish across the top of it. And what I'm throwing here is a little hollow-bodied frog. Instead of taking the time to try to pitch down into holes and fish it slow, I'm just dragging this frog over the top. And normally, a small fish won't come up and hit this. So usually when you get a bite on that frog, it's going to be a really good fish. It's not a numbers game here. You're trying to get, you know, a few big bites, and you may throw it for an hour without a bite, and then you might catch a couple real quick. But usually they're going to be quality fish, like, you know, 3 to 5 pound fish, if not bigger.
We're above 95, which most people call the swamp of Lake Marion. Full of this kind of vegetation and cypress trees and oxbows and stuff off the river. This time of year I like to go up here because of the fish stay shallow.
This area that we're in right now is actually part of the Santee National Wildlife Refuge. This is federal property right in here, as far as the land is concerned. And you know, talking about that crankbait, the way those fish hang out in those pods. We fished a couple weeks ago, and this happens. It doesn't even happen once a year, but you know, it's happened probably 6 or 7 times in my life. But we were fishing a spot a couple of weeks ago in a tournament, and the boy with me hooked a fish on the crankbait. Fish came up and jumped, you know, and I was getting the net and got the fish to the boat, and when he brought it up, there was 2. So, you know, what they'll do is they'll compete over that bait. And when he hooked the first fish, there was probably 2 or 3 others with him, and they were trying to get it from him, and one of them tried to get it and stuck too. So we ended up catching 2 on 1 cast. That happens with the crankbait, happens with a topwater occasionally.
Recommend anybody coming here for the first time at least get a guide to show you around so you can navigate safely. It's I mean, I've been running this place for 30 years and I still hit things from time to time.
There he is.
Yeah, he is no bigger than the last one. Santee Cooper has a lot bigger fish than this. And hooked well, but once again, pretty small fish.
Right now, and sun's high overhead. It's dead calm out here. I mean, this is a typical summertime day where you really need to be on the water at daylight. You know, the fish are going to be more active while that water temperature is, you know, still a little cooler. These slick conditions and the water being clear just makes that sun even more unbearable for them and for us. So I think we're going to pack it up and head back to the hill. You know, if we fished all day, we could probably beat out 2 or 3 fish. I think we had 3 bites altogether, and I didn't even hook but 1 of them, and just barely hooked him for just a split second. So you don't always catch them every time, but with bass fishing, that sort of brings you back. You know, it's more of a challenge than what you're gonna catch. Is the being out here and seeing the alligator, seeing the deer, seeing the ospreys, and just being out on the water.
All right. Well, I wish we'd have done better. We got 2 small ones. Next time on Rod and Reel, we'll see how it goes. I'm sure I'm beat this time. Nelson catches them every time. But we'll see you next time. Thanks. Live bait is, it is what it is. It's putting in the water what the fish naturally eats. If you like to catch fish, then it's great. You know, I mean, there's something more that you get from it when you fooled somebody, fooled a fish.
It took me a second to even catch on what that was. You just saw me looking around for the talking fish.
Let me turn this thing off.
That was good though.